Welcome to Security Boulevard, the cybersecurity podcast from the Futurum Group. Each episode explores a variety of topics within cybersecurity and the technologies that drive it. You can find us on securityboulevard.com, the Security Boulevard YouTube channel, TechStrong TV, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. Before we jump in, let's meet today's guests, starting with Jack Pollard. Jack, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Tom.
And also joining us is my good friend, Drew Conry-Murray. Drew, it's a pleasure to see you.
Always a pleasure to be invited. Thanks, Tom.
Oh, we love having both of you on because I'm never going to run out of great takes on this. The only problem with having Drew on is we do the Spider-Man thing where we both ask each other questions because we both do podcasts. We're like, wait, one of us has to say something.
I'm much more comfortable asking questions, so
that's how it works. But let's jump into the episode today because it's a fun one. We evidently now have a name for this whole AI going out and finding all of the problems in your system and reporting like 800 bugs and ruining everybody's day. It's called the Vulnpocalypse. Not to be confused with Vulngate, which I'm sure is something that we'll probably come up with later when we find out that Mythos actually didn't find all of those vulnerabilities or whatever. But there was some interesting writing that went on last week where a few pundits said, yeah, this isn't your problem. This is somebody else's problem. And that somebody else being the CISO and the CIO and the development team and all that other stuff. So let's not have a meltdown and get all bent out of shape because we found 300 vulnerabilities in Firefox or something. That's somebody else's problem to worry about. So I wanted to get both of your takes on this. Are we living in a world now where everything is just, chaotic and hair on fire? Or is this the same world we've been living in, just accelerated a little bit?
Both and yes and both.
Thanks, Jack.
Look, the reality is it long before AI came around, I could put a vulnerability scanner in an enterprise IT environment and come up with thousands of vulnerabilities. And the challenge has never been finding the vulnerabilities. It's always been, how do you process that list of vulnerabilities and prioritize it? So when you look at all of the different vendors who are in the vulnerability management, and now there's that provide vulnerability management tools, and now there's a flavor of that called CTEM, Continuous Threat Exposure Management, which is where we do some automated testing to validate our controls haven't changed over time, and the controls to block vulnerabilities. The difference between all the vendors is not their ability to find vulnerabilities. It is, does their priority list and their priority scheme match your particular priority scheme, right? So if I prioritize and I say the most important thing is which of my systems has the most vulnerabilities, and that's what the vendor says is the most important, then great, we're a match. We have a love fest. We buy the product and we go and we start working down that list. If we have other ways of prioritizing it, we start working on that list. But the problem is, like I said, it's never been finding it. So the fact that Mythos is finding them is great, but doesn't solve the IT problem.
And just to be clear, one of the things that we brought up in a previous episode, and I want to make sure that I clarify, one of the things that makes Mythos so radical is that it has an exploit chain capability. It can actually go out and do something with the exploits that it finds, because in a piece of reporting that we saw right after Mythos was unleashed on the general public, a lot of the things that it found were things that Claude could find as well. It's just that Mythos has the ability to take the next step and say, what can I do when I exploit this? And so, Jack, to your point, I think that it's important for people to realize that we're entering into an era where the idea that there is now a lag time between discovery and exploitation effectively shrinks to zero. Because there are a lot of people out there that say, I can find a problem, but I can't do anything about it because the way to craft an exploit to make this happen is so onerous that it practically is impossible. I liken it to watching people doing tricks in video game speed runs. It's like, yeah, if we knew how to do that as a human, like we could blow this game wide open, but unfortunately humans can't do that. Well, we are now in a realm where humans don't have to do it anymore. These are computer-aided issues where, it's like if there's a race condition and it takes like 100 milliseconds for the system to execute this one thing, now the system can do that. Or in the case of Mythos, it can do an exploit chain where it's like, hey, these 2 vulnerabilities in Firefox actually caused 100 other vulnerabilities because I can use those to stair step to other things. Now, the plus side of that is that if I can close off those 2 vulnerabilities that lead to the chain, then I can wipe out all of the bugs that it found. So in a way, this is helping me because it shows when I'm doing resource allocation, yeah, that bug is important to close now because it's not just a memory leak, it's a memory leak that can lead to 8 other things. So maybe I'm a little bit happy that we finally got people off their duffs to do stuff.
I feel like more information can be helpful. The problem is, as Jack mentioned, we've known there are lots of vulnerabilities in our organizations for decades, and the problem is, 1, is a patch available? 2, if the patch is available, does it work? Is it going to break something when I roll it out? 3, what is my patch window in which I can get this rollout installed across my entire fleet? So those problems don't go away. And now you've got this additional pressure of, oh my God, everything's on fire all the time.
I'm sorry. I would dive into that a little bit farther and say that a big portion of dealing with the vulnerabilities is not technical. It's actually the people process problem, right? As you mentioned patch windows, right? As patch windows are fewer and farther between these days, and they're shorter than they used to be. And that's because organizations up until this point have been willing to accept the risk of compromise versus the pain of a downtime, right? The other problem we have is there's a lot, especially in large organizations, there's a lot of process involved and double checking our work, which is all very good. But then you find out because of all this process involved, it can take 2 to 3 weeks to approve a firewall rule change. Well, that's a 2 or 3 week window where we didn't used to have the ability. When you learned about an exploit, it wasn't in the wild for 2 or 3 weeks. Now, when you hear about an exploit, a vulnerability, it's in the wild instantly. And so you no longer have that luxury of waiting 2 or 3 weeks to deal with it.
I think, Tom, if we want to maybe try to extract a little bit of positivity from this, one thing that occurs to me is if it's great that this tool, one good thing about this tool being so effective is software developers can take it and start running it, as part of their QA so that they are shipping more secure software, which would be great and would solve much of this problem. I'm also curious if there's an opportunity to take what Mythos and Claude and others can do and help build mitigations, in anticipation of a patch that organizations might be able to do, like Jack mentioned, a firewall change or something. And of course, those are also tricky, but if we can get mitigations in place faster as we're waiting for a patch to roll out, or we can take the time to work through our process, maybe those are some benefits. One other thing that comes to mind is I hope the customers of all of these software companies are getting these, vulnerability lists and being like, what am I paying for? Like, we really need to push back on the software industry. The buyers need to push back and be like, why are you selling me this stuff that is riddled with vulnerabilities?
Oh, I know the answer to this, Drew. I know the answer. It's because I need new features. I need new features added every quarter because if I don't add new features, then nobody wants to upgrade or pay me to subscribe to upgrade. And then I don't get my mythical 9% year over year, quarter over quarter growth. And then Wall Street gets mad and everybody gets fired. And that's where we've seen a lot of problems over the years, right? Like there's rumors now that Apple's new iOS that's supposed to be announced in about 2 weeks as of this recording is effectively going to be like a bug fix release, like the infamous Snow Leopard OS 10, which by the way was still one of the best OSs they ever released because 0 new features, but we fixed a whole bunch of other stuff that wasn't right. But we've seen this with Microsoft Windows with their cadence of having to release patches every couple of months. They get snarled up because some of the stuff doesn't work. Some of it's a little quirky problem. Some of it is you can't access a BitLock disk anymore. And you're right. We have this problem where the developers have a list of things that they need to fix that's prioritized, and they fix them. And then as soon as they fix 2 things on the list, 4 more things become a problem because of the interaction of those 2 fixes with everything else. And yeah, I freely admit, like, there are days when I just want the stupid thing to work. I'm tired of the bugs, but sometimes the bugs come out of nowhere, right? Like the app was stable and then an OS release came out and now the app isn't stable anymore. You're like, well, whose fault is that? And then what happens if you change the method the system used to authenticate, and now there's a hole in the authentication system? Was it my fault for not knowing that you upgraded the code? Was it your fault for upgrading the code but not telling me that this method would do this? And then what's the ultimate fix? Well, now I have to wait for my fix to be pipelined through your system to be approved, to be deployed. And that's a problem. If I get exposed and the cyber insurance company is like, well, you should have applied this patch. Well, I did try to apply the patch, but I was like, do you see now where the arguments are starting to happen? And it all comes down to the same thing: money. Like, I'm losing money. I need to get my money back. The company that promised me to pay my money back is trying to find every reason they can not to pay that. And who's left holding the bag?
So, I mean, one way to address that is to sort of flip the notion of we make our money on shipping new features and bend it more toward we make our money on shipping a stable product.
Well, yeah, and that's what some companies do, right? Every company has a different value proposition. Every vendor does, and some vendors do not have a rapid release cadence for that reason, right? And some vendors do. And you bring up and not to derail the conversation completely sideways, but when you look at an Apple system and you look at a Windows PC, right, up until Microsoft finally put a line in the sand and says, "That's it, we're done," Windows 10 could run on anything that was from the mid 2000s, 2020, 2021 PC, all the way back to something built in the 1990s, right? And when you have to support that vast stretch of diversity, it's very hard to make sure you're bug free all the way through that very complex environment. Apple having a walled garden and being able to say, hey, we no longer support x86 processors. Do you have one? Buy new hardware. We're not supporting it, right? Go buy an M4 Mac or an M1, M2, M3, right? They just told everybody to we don't care, right? And that's a choice buyers make of what they want in an environment, what tools they want, and what level of quality and what they're willing to pay for. And if you look at I think Drew, you sort of alluded to it, or Drew or Tom, if you think about things like cloud software, right? It's built upon layers. There's a lot of dependencies that a cloud service, that a cloud software SaaS solution depends on, that's out of their control. They do the best they can to make a secure and reliable solution, and then something outside of their control goes and changes it. And now what do? Right? So yes, there's only so much you can do in reality.
Is a cloud software vendor's thing really outside their control though? Like when you think about it, because yeah, you're right. Like Windows has had to support printers from the 1990s for a long time. The fact that Apple still allows OSs to be installed on phones that are more than 5 years old is kind of freaky when you think about it. And yet in the cloud, everyone's like, oh, well, the customers can do whatever they want with it. It still has to run on AWS. It still has to run on Microsoft. And those are fairly standardized systems. Like, I'm not going to have to worry about installing this on a Pentium 3 if you could possibly, because I know that somewhere out there is a customer that would say that, like, well, we got a spare server over here. And I know this is true because if you look in fields like medical or financial, like there's a reason why ATMs still run Windows XP, is because nobody wants to upgrade them to run something more quote unquote modern or hardened, because that's a sunk cost. And every time I have to upgrade those units, it costs me money, and I don't want to pay money.
If you want to talk about it in those terms, if you think about the medical device industry, every time you make a change to software or hardware, you have to go and get it reapproved through FDA or through your medical regulatory, whatever. So that is not minor cost. That's massive costs and time. So those systems still run Windows XP, because the cost of revising that and going through reapproval is not thousands or hundred thousands, but it's hundreds of millions of dollars. Right? I mean, it's real money.
But the reason why the regulatory body has to sign off on it is because it has to be rock solid and it has to work.
Yes.
And yes, look, if I turn Mythos loose in a hospital, yeah, it will be like reams of paper of things that could possibly be exploited. But then it comes back to the cost benefit analysis, because like we said, developers don't just sit around sword fighting each other with paper towel rolls while they're waiting for their code to compile. or they're ran out of Claude tokens, I think is the new one that I saw courtesy of Drew's newsletter last week. They're working on things, right? Either they're fixing bugs or they're implementing new features. And so the question then becomes, which one of those needs to take precedence? I think the balance has shifted a little bit more towards the bug fix now that we have a tool that can expose them more quickly, but that's still a monetary cost, right? If I'm prioritizing bug fixes, the new features don't come out. If I'm prioritizing new features, some of them are going to be buggy. And then you're telling me, oh, well, I need you to prioritize fixing features on OSs that are way old that nobody knows how to work on because those people retired years ago and Microsoft doesn't even support it anymore. And now the costs have gone through the roof because somebody got a Mythos report that was full of red.
Yeah, it's a tough position to be in. And maybe the glib answer is, well, AI will fix it all.
Well, I don't think it's glib, but it's actually not glib. And the irony here is that we spend lots and lots of we spill ink. We have lots of time, you and I do, on talking about these things on podcasts about attackers using AI and automating the attacks. And what we're missing is saying, how do we apply AI and automate the defense side of the world? And one of the big challenges that I think that I see all the time is we have this little term called human in the loop, HITL, where we want humans in the defensive loop. And I maintain that that's a problem that we're already broken. Long before Mythos happened, we were already at the point where we were finding more vulnerabilities than we had the bandwidth to deal with them, to fix them or patch them or put in compensating controls. And now we need to get to the point where we've automated our defenses so that we can operate at machine speed and scale and not human speed and scale and be able to defend using the same technology or better technology than what the attackers are using.
So coming back to where we are right now, whose problem is this? There was this great article that came out from Andy Ellis that basically said the Vulnpocalypse isn't your problem. And your, in this case, being IT professionals, people who spend a lot of their time working in, operations. He's like, this is an executive problem because they need to allocate resources. And this is a development problem because they have to write the fixes. Don't get wrapped around the axle thinking that you guys have to go out and save the world. I mean, even though that's operations job, right? Saving the world. So like whose problem is this? Who should be worrying about this? And should operations teams be staying up at night?
The way you phrase it, in some ways, he's right in that this is what the CISO or the CIO role is. You are, by taking that position, stepping up to be the head that's on the chopping block for stuff like this. You have to make a case to the business about why why your tech strategy needs to go a certain direction, why investments need to be allocated in certain ways. So, from an organizational structure, I would say he's right. The problem is that we all know that, crap rolls downhill and eventually it is operations problem.
But I think it also depends on what type of organization you are. If you're a software development organization and you're putting out software that, you're charging for your software to sell to somebody else, it's incumbent upon you to make it as vulnerability free as possible. And therefore it's a DevOps problem, right? It's a developer problem. They have to go and find and fix the bugs. On the other hand, if I'm a consumer of that same very software, I know that they can't fix every bug instantaneously. And it's incumbent upon me to understand which of these issues, which of these vulnerabilities affects my particular situation, and to put some compensating controls in place one way or the other to deal with it. One is I do nothing and accept the risk that comes with it, or I put in a firewall rule or some other compensating control, or I document it, or I understand it, right? That's an IT problem, and it's also a CISO problem for that organization receiving that software. CISO and the security team has to understand what the security implications are, but ultimately IT and IT ops is the ones with hands on the keyboard, changing patching the software, finding the maintenance windows, and or putting in the firewall rules as a security thing. So it's sort of a team sport, right? But it really depends on the type of organization. If you can't just wave your hands and say, hey, it's a CISO problem and I'm just going to ignore it until the world falls apart.
Jack, I want to live in the fantasy land that you live in. And I'll tell you why, is because I promise you that if the CIO does implement a fix for this, guess who's getting all the credit for it? Not the team. The CIO, the CISO, whoever did it, is definitely going to get the credit for improving shareholder value and reducing risk and all the other stuff that is kind of their job. Meanwhile, operations is keeping things from catching on fire, which is, of course, their job, but they never get credit for it. And I feel like that's part of where we're at, is that a lot of the people that are above the knowledge workers, the foot soldiers on the front lines, they love to get rewarded or recognized for making hard decisions, but they don't actually like making those hard decisions. And like you said, sometimes, and we've seen this a lot recently with things like, some of these big CVSS scores that are coming out, like there's a real, like, there may not be mitigations, or the mitigation may be very difficult and the patch could be days or weeks away. And so that's why you get paid big bucks, folks, is to say, well, what if we restrict access to this service until then? One of my favorites is when you get a CVSS that's like, oh, well, the mitigation is don't expose management to the internet. And my first thought was, who the heck is managing this thing from the internet? And then my second thought is, okay, well, that's a pretty easy fix, but then it's not, because somewhere out there is a system that needs access to that dashboard, or a contract worker that they're not going to set up a VPN for, or something like that. And then the corner cases become the reality. Yes, if you look at the entire scale of everything that's going wrong, it should just be as easy as turning this thing off. It's never that easy. I wish it was. Because in reality, everybody has something that doesn't fit the mold there.
The other thing I'll say is that in some ways it's all of our problem. We, as people living in essentially a digital world, like I'm just thinking about the Canvas attack, like students were trying to take exams and upload essays and got shut down. Like they suffered the fallout of a string of executive decisions around investment in and building procedures around cybersecurity. So CISOs and CIOs can do all the risk management and make all the sign-offs and stuff. But if something goes wrong, the consumer is the one that also ends up paying, and we get no recourse, except maybe you get a free year of credit monitoring.
You beat me to it, because I was going to say, Drew, I have so much free credit monitoring.
Right, I know.
But the thing is, like, you knew exactly what was going to happen, right? They didn't hit Canvas on, February the 15th.
Yeah, or
nobody
July
cares
15th.
about Canvas on the 15th. They care about it during finals week, and they care about it during the end of the semester when the teachers are starting to put in their grades. And that's where I think that we have a huge problem with this vulnerability scanning tool stuff. It gives us immediacy, right? Like one of the problems that the whole no honor among thieves thing. Like, if I know that I'm sitting on a really awesome 0-day that could pay off if I just launch it at the right time, like, taking down the broadcast networks on the day of the Super Bowl, there's nothing to stop somebody from saying, yeah, well, if I have access to it, I'm going to launch it a week early so that I can get paid before you do. But now the immediacy problem of AI is, anytime I want to turn my tool onto that, I can find something and exploit it as quickly as I can in days, as opposed to having to sit on things for weeks and put my campaign together. And I think that if we as defenders are not reacting with the same immediacy, then we're opening ourselves up to a massive amount of problems.
Bro, and again, it's sort of a both sides equation, right? You guys were talking about the CIO taking responsibility, but he also is a very public face that gets to take the penalties when things go badly, right? Now, I have worked in one engineering organization where bugs became public and the engineer responsible was excoriated literally in the press. And that was at Netscape right after Netscape went public. And one of the engineers was profiled for screwing up in the San Jose Mercury News. And that's a really bad place to be when you're a peon in an organization, right? And CIOs, if we want engineers to fix these things and not create buggy solutions with vulnerabilities, security has to be part of the compensation. You got to be, it's all got to be part and parcel of the package of what you think about. If you then hold them up to ridicule when they screw up, they're never going to want to do anything, right? The phrase you used was Tom, was the CIOs got paid the big bucks. they have the most amount of risk involved, and that's why they get the most amount of reward, right? Is when it goes south, their job goes with it, right? The engineer who created that vulnerability, their job doesn't disappear. It was a mistake. They didn't do it on purpose, right? They're not getting fired. I mean, I have not heard of engineers getting fired for some of these vulnerabilities because we're human. These things happen, and it's very, very hard in complex environments to build systems that are 100% vulnerability free.
So how do we fix this? I guess the kind of coming back to one of my favorite things to ask people is how do we resolve the vulnpocalypse problem of finger pointing and resource allocation? I know, gentlemen, fix all of the world's problems in the next 5 minutes. How hard
Up
can
next,
it
world
be?
hunger.
Right. Like, after you and I and Jack get done with this, we're going to tackle some other problems like alien life or world peace or whatever. Because if we can fix an AI vulnerability scanning problem, the rest of this should be easy. But what are some things you think that people should be looking at that we should use to fix this?
I think there's a couple of things. One is elevating the importance of cybersecurity in your organization, whether you are producing software, consuming software. If you're producing software, understand that cybersecurity has to be a component of the process of developing software. Compensate your developers for more than just feature functionality and meeting schedule. So put time in the schedule for security checks, put time in the schedule for doing things like Mythos scans and to fixing the issues when they come. Tom, I think you had a great idea, which is do something like schedule alternating releases. One set of releases is feature functionality. One set of releases is reliability, removing vulnerabilities, improving the reliability and the quality of the software, right? That's on the sort of the software development side, the producing side. If you're a consumer, is build in processes to say, I know it's coming. I know something bad is going to come down the road. I will be exposed to it. So how do I build a cyber resilient organization, cyber resilient system so that as these things come down the pike, I can react as quickly as possible to them and maintain a secure environment as best as possible?
I guess I would say I would love to see, the large AI model builders. They're obviously learning a lot about how software works. If they can take the learnings from what all the vulnerabilities they're discovering and turn that into really effective coding assistants that can help us build more software and let's start a pipeline, that would be great. I feel like it's a little Pollyannish, but maybe it's possible. We're never going to eliminate all vulnerabilities because of the complexity of software and because of the complexity of the environments that different pieces operate in. For the consumers of software, business consumers, I would say where you can, use your power to raise this as an issue in your buying decision. Make your vendors understand that this is important to you, that stability and security are important to you, and that is going to be a core criteria when you are signing on the dotted line about what you're going to buy. And there's tons of advice on how to build out a more effective and sustainable security operations, patching operations. So go look up all that and do what you can, but also make sure you've got a business continuity, disaster recovery plan in place and test it.
Very good advice. I will follow along with, I like the idea of the feature stability, TikTok kind of thing. We've gotten away from that in this whole idea of subscription-based software means that I have to constantly be pushing new features.
Mhm.
You need to push back on that with the companies. I expect it to be stabilized every other quarter, every other month. I do not want to be constantly fixing your bugs or patching around your bugs. And more importantly, and this speaks to people out there, because I actually have a friend in a different industry who is forced to use effectively a maintenance CRM type situation. And they are like, well, we're just introducing AI because we need to up the monthly cost kind of thing. Be ready to walk away. Like I'm sure that the company knows that you really can't walk away or that the transition will be painful, but flat out tell them, I'm willing to endure the pain because you no longer listen to me. If raise your hand if you're fed up with the way that Intuit runs QuickBooks. Everybody I have talked to says they hate the way that QuickBooks works, and yet they still use it because there's no other alternative. vibe code your solution to QuickBooks and then walk away from it. If enough people do that and then specifically say, I'm leaving you because you did this, or you have these vulnerabilities, or you changed these features that I don't like, then people will listen because they will see the money walking out the door, and so will Wall Street. But the problem is, and this is the hard part, folks, you've got to stick to it. Because much like anything in life, whether it is subscribing to Netflix or a wrestling storyline, you have to stick with it for more than 3 weeks. Otherwise, people don't think it means anything.
Mhm.
But what you should stick with for more than 3 weeks is this podcast. And I'm only saying that because if you do, I get to keep my job for a little while longer. But I love having great co-hosts like Jack and Drew joining us. Jack, what are some things that you're working on that people should check out, and where can they go to find those?
I'm actually working on a lot of in research on the intersection of AI and cybersecurity in general. And so it's both AI for cybersecurity and cybersecurity for AI. And you can find me at Security Boulevard. I've got a column there, as well as on LinkedIn and at Paradigm Technica, my cybersecurity industry analyst company.
Yeah, I podcast at packetpushers.net. You can hear me on the Network Break podcast, Heavy Networking, and our own security podcast called Packet Protector, packetpushers.net. We recently released a salary survey for the networking community. So if you're curious to see what your salary looks like, you can download it for free. It's right on the top of our website. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm on Drew CM at Blue Sky.
And if you love listening to me try to keep the circus going around here as the ringmaster, you should totally check out the stuff that Drew's on, because he does the exact same thing for the people he works with. And I'm so very glad that he does. I will be back, depending on when you listen to this, I'll be at Cisco Live. We're going to be doing a couple of days of presentations out there, and I'm going to run into a bunch of people that I know. If you're out there at Cisco Live, please hit me up. I'm networkingnerd.net on Blue Sky, or, just, I don't know, send up the nerd signal and I'll see it, and we'll go hang out. But otherwise, make sure you check out techfieldday.com for more stuff. We have a lot of events that were coming up. We just posted a lot of video from different things. We'd love to get your ideas and share it. But of course, come back to the Security Boulevard podcast every week, because we love it when you listen, and we hope that you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, go over to YouTube, subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Use the app. If you're using Apple Podcast or Overcast or whatever it is, we would love it for you to subscribe, because then that way we just show up in your ear when you need us the most. We would love it if you'd leave us a rating and a review, because when you do that, it tells other people how awesome we are, and word of mouth works. This podcast is brought to you by Security Boulevard and the Futurum Group. If you want to check out other episodes, you know where to find them, securityboulevard.com, the TechStrong TV website, or if you are an app person, use the TechStrong TV app, because we're putting all of our content out there, whether it's Security Boulevard, Tech Field Day, Agents of Dev, you name it, our podcasts are out there. And it's available on pretty much every smart device that you can think of. And we're going to get it running on Windows XP next week when I have free time. Follow Security Boulevard on X, Twitter, and LinkedIn at SecurityBLVD for more content. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and we'll see everybody next week.